Do you guys remember when the entire world was in panic of a brand new disease that would lead to a large pandemic lockdown and kill millions of people? That we also turned into a meme not so long ago? Yeah, whatever happened to the Hantavirus? I swear, it's been a while since I've seen such a large suspected global crisis pass so quickly. Like, was it even relevant for a month? Dude, at its prime, this thing was being talked about like it was an Avengers level threat. Now, it's literally barely a joke. I'm sure to believe the Hantavirus and cruise ship incident had to have been some sort of government psyop or whatever, because there's no other way something that gained immense popularity for having the potential to cause another major global crisis be forgotten and glanced over after such a short amount of time. But jokes aside, to understand the, I guess, fall of the Hantavirus, we're gonna have to look back at some of humanity's past to understand where our fear of pandemics actually came from. Alright, the first major outbreak we're going to be talking about is the Bubonic Plague, also known as the Black Plague or the Black Death, specifically the outbreak that lasted from 1346 to 1353. Now, the Bubonic Plague, for the very special people who don't know, is one of, if not the most destructive diseases recorded in history, devastating Europe and Asia during medieval times. Now, with an horrifying ass name, like the Black Death, and a reputation such as that, you may come to think, some of this has to be glazed, right? But I can assure you, the Bubonic Plague was genuinely on that timing back then. The Bubonic Plague had an estimated body count that puts even body blue to shame at a whopping 75 to 200 million people. In other words, about a literal third of the global population at the time, on some Thanos type shit. And a death rate of about 50 to 90% for untreated individuals, which were all of them, since medicine barely existed back then. The symptoms only make it worse, including sudden high fever and chills, severe headaches, fatigue, muscle pains, and gastrointestinal issues like vomiting and diarrhea. And the development of BUBOs, which are basically like extremely painful warts that can grow on your neck, armpit, or groin, filled with infectious pus that, if untreated, will rupture and enter your bloodstream. Yeah, that shit was fucking fatal back then. So fatal, in fact, that in Europe, the streets were filled with dead corpses, not even just because of death to the plague itself, but also famine, since the plague killed the farmers making the food. Now, earlier I refrained myself from saying the most dangerous disease in history, because people back then were stupid as shit. This is in a time 500 years before germ theory, and the average person could barely comprehend what a disease is, let alone how one even comes to be. People back then were extremely unhygienic and lived in germ heaven. And like mentioned earlier, dead bodies piled up in the streets didn't help. And you know why? Bacteria-ridden bodies only helped to spread the bacteria. Like, holy shit, what the fuck were these people thinking? I'll tell you what. They thought that disease was partly caused by bad odors. And that's why plague doctors wore those masks. The beaks were filled with flowers and other good-smelling shit because they thought, oh, if I smell good, then I'm safe. And fun fact, people only stopped believing that in the 1800s to early 1900s. Like, bro, perfume companies would have made a fucking fortune back then. And the only other way people thought to defend themselves from the plague was by praying hard enough, like some sort of anti-vaxxer. So people started doing some random shit in the name of religion, which obviously failed, because of course it did. In what world would that work? Like, I'm sorry, John Smith of Medieval Town, forming into a conga line with your friends and whipping each other across multiple villages like some sort of BDSM bang bus isn't going to help stop the plague that killed 60% of your continent or appease God. However, with the help of humanity's plot armor, the people of the 1300s unintentionally figured out how to stop the plague through plague doctors accidentally figuring out how to use proper germ-resistant equipment, early quarantining attempts, and flea and rat populations going down. You see, back then, people actually used a very early version of quarantining and isolation tactics to help lessen the spread of the plague. And with the help of fluctuating flea and rat populations, which were the ones to start the disease in the first place, the disease eventually died out. Honestly, it's really hard to tell if it was the disease that was dangerous or humanity's stupidity. But honestly, I really think it's just both. Fast forwarding through about 600 years of boring shit, we get to our next outbreak at the tail end of World War I in 1918. The Spanish flu, or the Influenza Virus, which, fun fact, it was called the Spanish flu because Spain was the first to report it, even though patient zero was actually in the US. So every country just kind of blamed Spain for the outbreak because what has America ever done? But that's besides the point. Now, remember when I said that the plague was one of, if not the most devastating diseases in history? Yeah, there's a reason I said disease and not pandemic. The influenza pandemic in 1918 is known as one of the deadliest pandemics in history, absolutely aura-mocking the Bubonic Plague. Yeah, that's right. Although the Bubonic Plague was more lethal to its populations, that was only because it existed in a time where people had genuine rocks in their head. While the influenza virus killed more people in a shorter amount of time during a more advanced age in history with actual medicine. Looking at the stats here for the influenza virus, it had infected 500 million people and we're at the solid 50 mil death count with a 2.5 to 5% death rate, which may sound low, but that's a 1 in 40 chance you die in an age of modern medicine. Symptoms included sudden high fever, chills, body aches, sore throat, and extreme thirst. However, the virus frequently evolved with deadly pneumonia characterized by severe shortness of breath, heavy internal bleeding, and a dangerous lack of oxygen. Furthermore, the influenza virus was unique, mainly targeting and killing unks between 20 and 40 years old, unlike other flus who mainly targeted the little jits and old heads. However, the virus isn't just deadly, it also had luck on its side. Remember when I mentioned the pandemic started at the tail end of World War I? The influenza virus used that to its advantage and decided to strike while everyone in the war were shooting each other like back when it was prime Fortnite. This basically transformed it from level 1 cook to level 99 mafia boss very fast. Due to the overcrowding of troops in close quarters, the transportation and replacing of sick soldiers in war, medical shortages, which in a time of total war meant all resources were sent to the battlefield, and wartime censorship, which basically was meant to prevent soldiers from worrying about their families back at home, but instead led to little to no public knowledge of the virus, which prevented quarantine acts and led soldiers to come back home with their family either sick or dead. Imagine how much that would suck, just going back home from war ready to see your family and maybe crack on some fine shit just to see no one home because everyone died of the fucking super flu. At the time, the hospitals were packed as if there was a big ass sign that said free Kool-Aid pineapple pickles inside. What's even worse was that the virus is so fatal that if you stayed unconscious for even a second too long in the hospital, they would toss you in the hole and bring out the next patient. I say the hole since people were dropping like flies back then. They were running out of places to put bodies in, so they just started digging big ass holes and started testing how many bodies they can stick in it, which now that I'm saying it out loud, that sounds crazy. However, by the end of 1918, it ran out of worthy hosts and kind of just dissipated into the flu we know today, which yes, is a much shittier version of the influenza virus, which compared to its terror-mongering prime, it's like subhuman at best now. Alright, now we're talking about the last outbreak, and it's one that we all know a little too well. And, well, I try to skim over this one because it might be a touchy subject for some, and let's be honest here, we all know the story here. For a quick summary, for those who were like in a coma or something and don't know what COVID was, basically it was a widespread virus that went viral during late 2019 to early 2023. It caused a massive global pandemic and lockdown. It infected over 779 million people and caused over 7.1 million deaths, and had many different variants with their own death rates and death counts, with its peak being in around late 2021 with the Delta strand. However, after the COVID vaccine and successful quarantine policies worldwide, as well as COVID mutations weakening over time, it mellowed out and the pandemic ended naturally. COVID's symptoms were actually quite mild compared to the previous viruses and diseases mentioned, and to a lot of people an inconvenience at best. Some of these symptoms included persistent cough, fever, chills, fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, sore throat, congestion, and new lactation. When you're looking back at the pandemic, it was not even that bad. Yeah, it claimed the lives of millions, but looking at the stats, it's an over 1 in 100 chance you would die from this oh so dangerous virus, and even then, it mainly only killed the old heads and little ass kids, whose immune systems were weak, and furthermore, the symptoms were pathetic compared to other diseases or viruses. Like, oh no, I'm tired, I can't taste anything for a week or two. Like, that shit was low-key harmless. COVID makes the other pandemics I mentioned look like the embodiment of Satan himself. People describe the COVID virus as King Von, but honestly, to most, it was sweeter than Gam Gam's cookies. The worst thing about the pandemic was the lockdown itself, forcing everyone to stay home and not leave the house, which led to shit like Zoom for online school and working from home. And let's be honest here, absolutely no one was doing shit at that time. It also led to shortages of resources like toilet paper, because I guess in a global pandemic, the most important thing is something to wipe your crusty ass with. And in general, all outdoors activities like hanging out at your friends to smash each other was just not an option anymore. Although the lockdown and virus was basically just one big ass inconvenience to everyone, the thought of another pandemic occurring with an equally if not more lethal virus and another fucking lockdown was definitely threatening and kept people on high alert ever since. Alright, after that long ass history lesson, we finally get back to the present day and to the matter at hand. The Hantavirus. And for one last time, to the people that may not have been on social media recently, it all started at the cruise ship incident. Basically what happened was a South American Mickey Mouse spread the Hantavirus on someone on the ship, which usually isn't too big of a problem since Hantaviruses can't spread from person to person. However, this wasn't your usual strand and actually was contagious. This caused a lot of people on the ship to be sick and suffer symptoms like, I'm just gonna say, flu symptoms because I'm fucking tired of repeating myself. It may have also caused kidney and respiratory complications. This caused the cruise ship to be quarantined where no one was allowed to go home, which caused a lot of debate online and sparked into a sort of moral dilemma whether they should be allowed to go home or just rot and die out in sea. But I'm not gonna chip into that because there's no objectively evil side for me to go towards because, you know, I'm evil. Eventually, they were allowed to go home, which made everyone freak the fuck out because 13 people already died and it was starting to become evident that another pandemic may have been coming. However, everything about the virus kind of just disappeared. You see, people thought that the Hantavirus was a fast-spreading cancer, like the goddamn scourge virus, but in actuality, the Hantavirus is basically the potential man of viruses. And yeah, it had a lot of megamy, but it really couldn't become a global pandemic. First of all, although contagious, you basically have to be tip to tip with someone to catch it since it spreads slower than withered chica. And secondly, the main thing people were afraid of, the death count, was inflated because it only killed 13 people out of like the 30 people that were infected. And those 13 people weren't even in the best conditions. In addition to the virus's incompetence, the social media memes also kind of chipped into his fall from fame. Even though social media helped spread awareness, the memes helped lower public concern. Everyone was making jokes about how they're gonna be like Mahito and spread the virus if they ever catch it, and people just started saying, don't worry, I won't let you guys catch the HentaiVirus. Like, dude, how am I going to take the virus seriously if people are making memes of it and calling it the fucking HentaiVirus? Like, what is it gonna do, make me goon to death? This basically led people into passing the whole virus off as nothing but a joke. In conclusion, the Hantavirus scare was nothing but upscale due to the fear of another situation similar to the previous world-threatening pandemics such as the Bubonic Plague, influenza, and COVID itself. Essentially, riding the coattails of the big three pandemics just to end up being a total fraud, becoming a meme, and dying out after everyone realized the chud that the Hantavirus truly is. Alright guys, thank you for watching the video. I know this one's a bit longer than normal, but what are you gonna do? Thank you so much for the support last video. You guys nearly doubled my amount of subs. So thank you very much. And if you want to support me, you can also support me not only by liking and subscribing, but you can also support me by joining the Discord, following the Twitch, and my Insta and my channel bio. I plan on uploading videos weekly on Wednesdays, so stay tuned for that. And to make sure you never miss a video, like, comment, and crack that subscribe button. And I'll see you on the next shit I make.